Term limits restrict the number of terms an individual can serve in Congress. This issue has been controversial for many years. Is it a good or bad idea? Welcome back to Explaining Difficult Stuff. We are about to install the oldest average age of any congressional group in history. From a totally nonpartisan perspective, we will present both sides of the debate, and leave it to you to decide. Let's look at the facts. Term limits existed at the time of the American Revolution, and dates back as far as the Roman Empire. Many of our founding fathers were familiar with the idea. The Articles of Confederation, adopted in 1781, established term limits for the delegates to the Continental Congress. However, limits were not included in the U.S. Constitution of 1789. When the Constitution was ratified in 1788, several politicians regarded this omission as dangerous. In 1808, Thomas Jefferson made many statements calling for term limits. The two-term presidential tradition started with George Washington, and lasted 152 years. Franklin Roosevelt broke the tradition by winning the presidency for a third term in 1941. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment officially limited the term of a president to 2 four-year terms. Well, that is the history of term limits in the executive branch. To continue, what about term limits for representatives and senators in Congress? The tradition and practice of rotating representatives in Congress began to decline after the Civil War. By 1900, the era of unlimited congressional terms was in motion, and has not stopped since. By 1951, 23 states had term limits in place for representatives and senators. In the early 1990s, a popular movement to limit terms emerged. According to Gallup, most Americans supported congressional term limits, including 75% of Republicans, 66% of independents, and even half of Democrats. Term limits enable more frequent turnover in Congress, which some see as a necessary check against an out-of-control bureaucracy. The average congressional career lasts 16 to 18 years, and incumbents tend to win re-election 9 times out of 10. The average age of current U.S. representatives and senators is 59. To put it into perspective, the average age of Americans is 38 years old. In fact, the average age of the current congressional roster is the oldest in recent history. The most senior state senator is 87, while the oldest representative is 81. Let's review the pros and cons, so you can decide for yourself. Incumbents have a huge advantage over contenders. So much so, that 90% of the time, incumbents are re-elected. This happens even though the approval rating of Congress is consistently below 20%. Let's review what both sides have to say about the issue. Those who favor term limits like to see new faces in the race. Seeing the same people, election after election, is political stagnation. To which, those opposing term limits would respond, voters have a right to choose their representatives, regardless of time served. Next, supporters say, instead of doing their job, politicians waste time raising money for re-election. On the other hand, opponents claim, no matter how good someone is at their job, term limits would force them out. Are you beginning to wish you had some aspirins? Another bone of contention is, one side saying that term limits prevents people from becoming too powerful, while the other side states that term limits would usher out experience and continually introduce a lack of it. Remain calm. Can't we just agree to disagree? Some say, rather than career politicians, term limits would help regular people win office. They would better represent the nation. Others reply, experienced politicians are needed to craft complex policies that will affect our future. The beat goes on. Influential politicians might avoid issues that could hurt their careers. But, on the other hand, it's exactly those issues that need to be addressed by people with the most experience. Yikes, now I do have a headache. Lastly, those who would vote for term limits say it would help prevent career politicians from becoming too powerful. Others would argue that term limits would cause a brain drain in Congress. While this debate could go on and on, you get the picture. There are no easy answers. Forget party affiliation. In the end, you must decide for yourself. Are you in favor of term limits or not? Congratulations. We covered a lot in about 5 minutes. Now, you decide. Is term limits a good or bad idea? Post your comments below. We are interested in reading them. The link below offers a more detailed article about term limits. If you found this informative, subscribe to Explaining Difficult Stuff. It gives us the incentive to keep reaching out to people of all ages with our videos. Thanks for watching Explaining Difficult Stuff. By the way, there is no cure for curiosity.